When you observe the woman who walks alone, who drifts through the streets with eyes that carry both memory and mystery, you are not seeing weakness, you are witnessing an archetype awakening. She is the empath, the vessel of ancient feeling, the carrier of invisible burdens that do not belong solely to her. And though she appears isolated, her solitude is not punishment, it is initiation. The empath is often misunderstood because she is not designed for the noise of the collective. Her silence is not emptiness, it is the echo of the unconscious speaking to itself. You may ask why she has no friends, why the world around her seems unable to approach her essence without trembling. The reason lies deep in the architecture of the psyche. The empath's energy field is porous, her boundaries translucent. She does not merely see others, she feels them. To encounter her is to meet one's own shadow reflected in her gaze. That is why many retreat. The unconscious senses danger when it is mirrored too clearly. People flee from her, not because she is unkind, but because she awakens what they have buried. In analytical psychology, the empath is not merely a personality trait. She is an embodiment of the anima mundi, the world soul, the ancient feminine principle that connects all living beings. She stands at the border between consciousness and the collective unconscious, translating currents that others refuse to name. When she enters a room, the atmosphere shifts, the unspoken becomes audible, the unseen becomes tangible. She does not know why her body grows heavy after a conversation, or why her dreams replay the grief of strangers. She only knows that her heart aches for reasons that reason cannot explain. You must understand, this condition is not sentimentality, it is not softness, it is psychic exposure. The empath is like a nerve without skin, a mythic antenna tuned to the frequencies of invisible pain. She has walked through centuries of misunderstanding. Once she was called a witch. Later she was diagnosed as fragile or hysterical. But the truth remains. She is none of these. She is the intuitive witness of the unconscious drama that all humanity enacts, yet refuses to claim. When she walks alone, she is not truly alone. Around her move the shadows of countless souls whose voices were silenced. She carries them, often unwillingly, within her own bloodstream. Every sigh of hers is a prayer for the unloved. Every tear she sheds is an alchemical drop, transmuting darkness into compassion. And yet this gift feels like a curse, for in feeling everything, she loses herself. The empath's greatest danger is self-dissolution, the evaporation of identity within the suffering of others. To love without boundaries is to risk disappearing. In my years studying the human psyche, I have met many such souls. They do not fit comfortably into society's narrow molds. They appear dreamy, withdrawn, too sensitive for a world that rewards hardness. But beneath their apparent fragility lies an ancient power, the capacity to hold contradictions without shattering. The empath can love even those who wound her, because she perceives the wound behind the wounder. This is her nobility and her torment. Why then does she walk alone? Because few can accompany her into the depths she must traverse. Friendship, for here, cannot remain superficial. It must be soul to soul, or it withers. Most relationships cannot sustain such transparency. They demand masks, and she cannot wear them. Thus, solitude becomes her sanctuary, not her sentence. Within solitude, she dialogues with archetypes: the mother, the wounded healer, the orphan, the mystic bride. These figures rise within her dreams, each carrying a fragment of her forgotten wholeness. Often she dreams of water. It is never still. It moves between clarity and turbulence, symbolizing her emotional tides. In one recurring image I encountered from a patient, let us call her Ilara, she stood at the edge of an endless sea, collecting the cries of drowned children in small glass bottles. Each morning she awoke, exhausted, unable to explain the sorrow that clung to her skin. Only when she realized that the children were the lost fragments of her own innocence did healing begin. The empath's dreams reveal that the pain she absorbs from others is a mirror of her unintegrated past. The collective unconscious speaks through her private symbols. This is the path of individuation for the empath, to separate compassion from fusion, to feel without becoming consumed. It is not achieved through denial, but through discernment. The empath must learn that empathy without consciousness becomes possession. When she identifies completely with the suffering of others, she becomes the victim twice, once by proxy and once by choice. The art of psychic maturity is to love deeply while remaining centered. This balance is the work of a lifetime. You may wonder how such a woman survives in an age of noise. She survives by remembering that her sensitivity is sacred. In a civilization obsessed with speed and stimulation, she restores the lost art of stillness. Her intuition perceives what intellect ignores, yet the world calls her strange, antisocial, even cold. They mistake her introspection for indifference, but the empath does not withdraw because she hates people. She withdraws because she feels them too much. Her solitude is an act of hygiene, a cleansing of psychic overstimulation. The empath often carries ancestral memory, unhealed generational trauma that vibrates through her nervous system. She becomes the medium through which the lineage seeks redemption. When she forgives, she releases not only her pain, but centuries of silent suffering. This is why her path is so heavy. She is working for many souls, not just her own. To be an empath is to be born into invisible service, but the unconscious demands equilibrium. The same depth that grants her insight also tempts her toward melancholy. Depression, for the empath, is often not a disease but a descent, a necessary initiation into the underworld of the psyche. There she meets the archetype of the shadow, the dark twin of her compassion. She must face the truth that her empathy can hide pride, that in rescuing others, she sometimes avoids rescuing herself. This confrontation is brutal but liberating. Only when she embraces her own darkness does her light become authentic. Until then, her kindness will remain an unconscious strategy to escape guilt or loneliness. Listen closely. The woman who walks alone is not lost. She is being prepared. Her isolation refines her perception. The friends she once longed for would have distracted her from hearing the whispers of her own soul. Loneliness is her crucible. From it will emerge gold, the realization that love begins not in merging but in seeing. When she learns to befriend her own complexity, she will no longer need validation from the crowd. She will attract those who meet her at depth, not surface. There is a profound paradox at the heart of empathy. The more one feels, the greater the temptation to numb. Society anesthetizes itself through distraction, while the empath bleeds inwardly. To survive, she must learn the alchemy of boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are membranes that allow life to flow without contamination. When she says no, she is not rejecting love. She is preserving it. Without boundaries, love decays into martyrdom. The true empath is not the one who sacrifices herself endlessly, but the one who transforms compassion into clarity. I recall once asking a patient who identified deeply as an empath, "Do you feel other people's emotions? Or do you feel your own emotions through others?" She paused. Realizing that the two had become indistinguishable, this confusion lies at the root of much suffering. The empath must reclaim her inner territory, discerning what belongs to her and what does not. Otherwise, she lives as a psychic sponge, absorbing every vibration without filtration. The unconscious, however, seeks integration, not contamination. To integrate means to recognize that empathy and shadow are twins. The same sensitivity that allows her to perceive pain also enables manipulation if left unguarded. The empath attracts narcissists not by weakness but by resonance. She carries the unclaimed power they crave. When she unconsciously denies her own worth, she becomes the stage upon which the narcissist performs dominion. The cure is not withdrawal into bitterness, but awakening into self-possession. Once she remembers that her compassion is a strength, not a currency, the predator loses interest. Do not pity the woman who walks alone. Honor her. She walks between worlds, the conscious and the unconscious, the personal and the collective. Her solitude is not absence, but presence of spirit. In her silence, the psyche reorganizes itself. She listens to dreams as one listens to oracles. She communes with symbols instead of gossip. She has no friends because few speak her language, the language of depth. Yet, when she does meet another soul attuned to that frequency, the recognition is wordless and eternal. The path of the empath is the path of transformation. Through feeling, the heart, when purified of projection, becomes the most powerful instrument of perception. Through it, she sees the divine in the ordinary, the sacred in the broken. But this perception demands courage. the courage to remain open while knowing the cost, for to feel is to risk wounding. Yet numbness is a slower death. The empath chooses feeling even when it breaks her, because feeling is truth, and truth is the only bridge to wholeness. The empath's journey is not linear. It is cyclical, spiraling, like the ancient labyrinths carved into the stones of forgotten temples. She descends into her depths, believing she has lost her way, only to find that the darkness is not an enemy but a midwife to new awareness. The alchemy of her solitude begins when she stops running from her own sensitivity and starts understanding its message. For sensitivity, when awakened, is a form of intelligence. The intelligence of the soul. You see, the unconscious communicates through symbols, not logic. The empath, in her quiet, becomes its translator. While others dream and forget, she dreams and remembers. Her dreams are not fantasies. They are transmissions from the deeper strata of the psyche. They arrive veiled in images: a child calling from a forest, a serpent coiling around her wrist, a mirror cracking without shattering. Each symbol is a fragment of her inner scripture. When she decodes them, she begins to retrieve her scattered essence. The serpent that coils around her arm is not evil, it is transformation itself. It represents the life force that moves through both shadow and light, the same energy that heals and destroys, depending on how it is used. The empath who suppresses her anger in order to remain good has not transcended darkness. She has repressed it. True healing begins when she allows the serpent to shed her old skin, the skin of compliance, of self-erasure, of inherited guilt. For only through integration can she become whole. I have seen this pattern countless times. The empath attracts wounded souls because she has not yet tended to her own wound. She confuses healing with saving. She believes love means carrying the pain of others. But to carry another's pain is to rob them of their initiation. The unconscious demands that each soul confront its own darkness. When the empath takes on what is not hers, she interrupts a sacred process. This is why her relationships often end in exhaustion and betrayal. The universe conspires to teach her detachment through heartbreak. Her heart must break enough times for light to finally pour through the cracks. There comes a moment always that she sits alone at her table, feeling the silence around her like a weight. No one calls, no one understands, and she wonders if something is wrong with her. But what she does not yet realize is that this silence is sacred. It is the still point before transformation. It is in this emptiness that she begins to differentiate her voice from the collective noise. Solitude is not punishment, it is purification. Every mystic, every seer, every alchemist has walked this barren road. The empath is no different. And yet, there is danger here. The same solitude that heals can also seduce. The empath can become addicted to her isolation, mistaking withdrawal for wisdom. When she hides too long, she disconnects from the mirror of relationship, and the ego begins to whisper its distortions. You are special because you feel more. It says, You are above them, but this is merely another mask of the shadow. True empathy humbles, it does not elevate. The genuine empath knows that feeling deeply does not make her superior, it makes her responsible. She must use her insight not as a weapon of separation, but as a bridge toward understanding. This is the paradox of the archetype. The empath must first walk alone to learn who she is, but she must not stay alone. Individuation is not isolation, it is integration. The woman who walks alone must one day turn and walk back toward the world, carrying the gold of her transformation. Only then does she become the wounded healer, the one who has touched pain so intimately that her presence itself becomes medicine. She does not need to speak. Her being radiates wholeness. Consider the myth of Chiron, the immortal centaur wounded by an arrow that could not kill him. His wound became his teacher in healing others. He found meaning in his suffering. The empath is Chiron, reborn in feminine form. Her wound, the pain of feeling too much, is the very portal through which the collective may heal. But she must remember that the goal is not to remain wounded. The wound is not a home, it is a threshold. She must pass through it, not worship it. Many empaths build their identity around suffering. They say, I am this way because life hurt me. But the deeper truth is, life hurt me so that I may learn to see. Once she learns to see, the wound loses its necessity. What remains is wisdom, the serene understanding that pain is not punishment, but revelation. The soul evolves through contrast, through knowing darkness. It comprehends light. Through isolation, it rediscovers unity. Let us look more deeply at this unity. When the empath finally stops resisting her sensitivity, something extraordinary happens. The boundary between self and other no longer feels like invasion, but communion. She realizes that empathy, at its highest vibration, is not about emotional absorption. It is about resonance. To resonate with another is to acknowledge shared essence without losing individuality. This is love in its mature form. I feel you because I am you, yet I remain myself. This paradox resolves the empath's ancient dilemma, but to arrive there, she must confront one final guardian, the archetype of the shadow mother, the part of her that nurtures others while starving herself. This archetype is ancient, born of generations where women were taught that love means self-sacrifice. The shadow mother whispers, if you stop giving, they will stop loving you. And so, the empath gives until she bleeds. To reclaim her wholeness, she must recognize that true motherhood of the spirit includes herself. She must become her own caretaker, her own sanctuary. Only then can she love without depletion. When this realization dawns, the transformation is visible even in her body. Her posture changes, her gaze, once anxious and searching, becomes grounded and sovereign. She no longer seeks energy outside herself because she has remembered the source within. The unconscious, once chaotic, begins to organize itself around a new center, the self, the archetype of totality. She feels peace not because the world has become kind, but because she has become whole. Her friends, if they return, will find her different. She will speak less, but her words will carry weight. She will forgive, but not entertain toxicity. She will love, but with discernment. This is not coldness, it is mastery. The once porous empath has become a mirror of divine order. She feels everything still, but now it passes through her like wind through a harp, producing sound instead of pain. The same sensitivity that once drained her now creates music. The empath's loneliness dissolves when she realizes that she was never alone to begin with. Her solitude was populated by archetypes, ancestors, and fragments of the divine feminine reclaiming its memory. The friends she thought she lacked were the unseen allies within her psyche. The wise woman, the child, the lover, the warrior, they have all been waiting for her recognition, and now that she honors them, she carries within her an inner circle more loyal than any external companionship. In this realization, compassion deepens into serenity. She no longer needs to fix the world. She understands that the world reflects the inner state of collective consciousness. Her role is not to absorb pain, but to transmute perception. When she looks upon suffering, she sees the divine asleep. Her empathy becomes an act of witnessing rather than rescuing. She stands as a silent temple in the chaos, a reminder that sensitivity, when guided by wisdom, is the greatest power of all. And yet, even now, the empath must remain vigilant. The ego loves to steal the garments of the soul. It will try to turn her serenity into superiority, her solitude into cynicism. She must remember humility, the knowledge that she, too, is learning always. The path of the empath never ends. It evolves. Each cycle of pain, reflection, and renewal deepens her understanding of the mystery. She learns to bless the tides instead of resisting them. If you were to ask me, as so many have, whether it is possible for such a sensitive being to live in a world as harsh as ours, I would answer this. Not only is it possible, it is essential. Without the empaths, humanity would lose its capacity. For soul, they are the nervous system of civilization, registering its pain long before the intellect can name it. They are the early warning of spiritual imbalance. When an empath suffers, it is often a symptom that the collective heart has hardened. Here, healing, therefore, contributes to all. You see, every empath who learns to walk alone without bitterness adds light to the unconscious of the world. Her serenity ripples outward, unseen but undeniable. The collective psyche begins to shift ever so slightly towards compassion. And though she may never receive recognition for this invisible labor, the cosmos records it. Every act of inner transmutation echoes through the collective field. This is how evolution truly happens, not through grand revolutions, but through countless quiet transformations in the hearts of the sensitive when she finally stands beneath the stars and feels peace instead of ache. She understands what it was all for. The loneliness, the confusion, the unending sensitivity. It was all preparation for communion, not with people alone, but with existence itself. She belongs not to society, but to the soul of the world. She walks alone, yes, but she walks with everything. There is a moment, subtle yet profound, when the empath begins to realize that all the mirrors she has sought outside were fragments of a single vast mirror within. This is the moment of her initiation into the self, the central archetype that governs all psychic wholeness. The empath's loneliness was never a punishment, but the path toward this recognition. The absence of friends was not a void to be filled, but the silence in which the divine could whisper its truth. For in the absence of distraction, she can finally perceive that the relationship she was always yearning for is the one between her ego and her soul. The ego, in its anxious striving, fears being alone because it equates aloneness with insignificance. Yet the soul delights in solitude. It knows that isolation is the womb of revelation. The empath's retreat from the world is, therefore, an alchemical operation. It separates the base metal of the social self from the pure gold of the inner being. She must die to her persona, the identity built around helping, pleasing, and belonging to be reborn as the sovereign witness of her own depths. This death feels cruel. It strips away everything she once thought made her lovable, but without this stripping, she cannot become authentic. I have often said that the process of individuation is not a path for the faint of heart. It is a descent, an ordeal, a crucifixion of the false self. For the empath, this ordeal takes the form of emotional overwhelm. Every energy she absorbs, every heartbreak she carries, every silence that echoes too loudly in her nights, these are her initiations. Each feeling is a trial, and each trial, when endured consciously, refines the gold of awareness. Slowly, she learns that not all pain must be resisted. Some pain must be witnessed. In witnessing, without identification, she becomes free. When this awareness matures, the empath begins to perceive the sacred geometry beneath her suffering. She sees that her solitude, once heavy with sorrow, has become a field of resonance. She is no longer merely reacting to the energies of others. She is observing them with clarity, like a lake reflecting the stars. This stillness is not indifference, it is mastery. It allows her to see patterns in the collective psyche, to read the language of emotion, the way mystics once read the stars. Through her, the unconscious reveals its constellations. Her intuition sharpens. She begins to sense not just what people feel, but why they feel it. She can trace pain back to its origin, often generations deep. When she meets someone angry, she perceives the frightened child beneath the rage. When she meets someone manipulative, she feels the trembling emptiness that drives the control. This is not analysis, it is empathy illuminated by insight. It is what I have called the light of the unconscious. the fusion of emotion and awareness that transforms perception into revelation. At this stage, she is no longer drained by what she feels, because she is no longer personalizing it. She recognizes that the emotions moving through her are part of a larger tapestry. The field of human experience itself, she ceases to ask, why is this happening to me? And begins to ask, what is life trying to show me through this? This shift marks her entry into the archetype of the mystic woman, the union of feeling and wisdom. The mystic woman does not drown in empathy, she sails upon it. Her compassion is vast, but contained, radiant yet disciplined. To become the mystic woman, the empath must embrace her shadow completely. She must look at the parts of herself that resented others for not understanding her, the parts that secretly fed on being the one who feels more, the parts that feared power so deeply that she disguised it as fragility. Integration requires honesty, not idealism. The unconscious cannot be deceived. It demands truth in its rawest form, and so she must kneel before her own contradictions until judgment dissolves into acceptance. This humility is her coronation. The crown of consciousness is given only to those who have bowed to their darkness. When she rises from this confrontation, she feels something strange, peace without reason. It is not the peace of safety, but the peace of surrender. She no longer needs to control her environment, to feel balanced, because she has found equilibrium within. The world may rage, but her center remains still. She has entered what mystics across ages have called the inner marriage, the union of the masculine and feminine principles within the psyche. Her intuition, feminine, and her discernment, masculine, now move as one. She no longer oscillates between extremes of giving and withdrawing. She acts from balance. Her energy becomes magnetic. Yet, Seane, people sense it without understanding why. They are drawn not to her empathy, but to her wholeness. Her presence feels like a homecoming, for in her they sense the possibility of reconciling their own opposites. This is the true gift of the awakened empath, not to absorb the pain of others, but to reflect their potential for healing. She becomes a mirror of integration. This transformation alters the quality of her relationships. Where once she attracted chaos, she now attracts resonance. Where once she felt invisible, she now emanates quiet authority. Her solitude no longer isolates, it sanctifies. She can walk among crowds without losing her center, because her inner temple travels with her. Friendship, for her, becomes less about companionship and more about recognition. She meets others not to complete herself, but to celebrate the meeting of equals. And when she meets someone still lost in projection or shadow, she does not try to rescue them. She holds space. She knows that forcing awakening only breeds resistance. This detachment may appear cold to those who have not tasted wholeness, but it is, in truth, the highest form of love. To love without possession, to feel without absorption, to see without judgment. This is divine empathy. The mystic woman embodies it naturally. Her compassion is not emotional reaction, but spiritual clarity. It flows through her like a river through a channel, nourishing all it touches, but never depleting its source. Dreams begin to change for her. The symbols that once tormented now teach. She dreams of light emerging from deep water, of doors opening in forgotten rooms, of mirrors that no longer distort. These are not mere fantasies, they are messages from the self, confirming that integration is underway. When she wakes, she feels lighter, not because life has simplified, but because she no longer resists its complexity. You may notice at this stage that the empath's language evolves. She speaks less about energies and more about essence. She ceases to divide experiences into positive and negative. Everything becomes information, feedback, revelation. The unconscious is no longer a threat, but a partner. She understands now that the forces she once called dark were not evil. They were exiled aspects of life yearning to return to consciousness. When she welcomes them, they lose their teeth. What was once shadow becomes strength. What was once chaos becomes creativity. In this state of integration, she begins to feel a quiet calling to share what she has learned, not through teaching, but through being. Her very presence becomes instruction. People who cross her path feel safer, clearer, more aligned. She does not claim to heal them, yet healing happens. The energy she once scattered through worry or rescuing now flows coherently through her words, her silence, her art, her Gestures. She becomes what I call a living symbol, a human embodiment of psychic balance. The collective unconscious recognizes her as such, and synchronicities begin to unfold around her. Life itself collaborates with her consciousness. This is the point where the woman who once walked alone realizes that she was never walking away from people. She was walking toward herself. The journey inward was the journey home. The no friends she lamented was a necessary emptiness. Clearing the space for authenticity. Those who now enter her life are not companions of convenience, but allies of destiny. They resonate at the same frequency of awareness. Together, they form what could be called a circle of souls, a constellation of conscious beings linked not by need, but by resonance. This is friendship, reborn on the level of spirit. When she looks back, she does not despise her earlier sensitivity. She blesses it. For without that raw openness, she would never have entered the mystery. The tears she once cursed were baptisms. The loneliness she feared was initiation. Every emotion, every wound, every solitude was a doorway. She understands now that empathy was never meant to be a burden. It was an invitation to transcend personal identity and experience unity. She smiles now at the paradox of her path. The woman who once felt too much now feels everything, yet is disturbed by nothing. The woman who once had no friends now recognizes the entire cosmos as her companion. The woman who once walked alone now walks as the world itself, her steps echoing through the dream of creation. And now, as we come to the closing circle of this inner pilgrimage, the empath stands at the threshold of what can only be described as divine consciousness. The woman who once trembled beneath the weight of the world now carries it with quiet grace. She has passed through the labyrinth of projections, through the swamp of her inherited pain, through the desert of loneliness, and she has emerged luminous, not untouched by darkness, but transformed by it. She no longer asks, "Why do I feel so much?" but instead whispers, "How could I not?" For to be human in its highest form is to feel existence itself pulsing within you, not as torment, but as revelation. In her final stage of awakening, something subtle and irreversible unfolds. She begins to see that empathy, stripped of sentimentality, is not merely emotional resonance, but divine perception. It is the soul's way of recognizing itself in another form. To feel deeply is to remember that everything is connected. The pain she once thought was hers alone reveals itself as the pain of the collective, and her heart, once heavy, now becomes a bridge. Through it flows the understanding that there is no separation between personal and universal suffering. The empath does not absorb the world anymore. She is the world, conscious of itself. When this realization dawns, she stops searching for belonging. She has outgrown the human craving to be understood, for she now understands herself as part of the eternal psyche, the same archetypes that dwell within her pulse through every being. She recognizes her reflection, not only in people, but in rivers, in trees, in the shifting patterns of light on stone. This is not romanticism, it is the mystical truth that Jung hinted at when he spoke of the unus mundus, the one world where inner and outer are but mirrors of the same reality. The empath has become a conscious participant in that unity, and yet this enlightenment does not remove her from the world. It roots her deeper in it. She becomes what I would call a healer of perception. Wherever she goes, the invisible atmosphere changes. Conflict softens. Words spoken in her presence acquire weight. She does not instruct, yet her silence teaches. She has integrated what I once described as the archetype of the self, the symbol of wholeness, of God within the psyche. This union is not an escape from humanity. It is the fulfillment of it. The empath has become the instrument through which the universe experiences compassion for itself. Do not mistake this for perfection. Wholeness does not mean flawlessness, it means inclusion. The empath still feels pain, but she no longer identifies with it. She still senses darkness, but she no longer fears it. Every emotion, every shadow, every encounter is now part of the sacred dialogue between her soul and the totality. She has become the meeting point of opposites, the axis mundi, around which heaven and earth, spirit and matter, self and other converge. Her life is not easy, but it is meaningful beyond measure. You might ask, why must she walk alone if she carries such light? The answer lies in the paradox of consciousness itself. The higher one ascends in awareness, the fewer share that altitude. Solitude, therefore, is not absence, it is atmosphere. The empath's aloneness is the quiet required for communion with the infinite. But there is another reason. She walks alone so that others may one day walk together. Her journey into depth expands the collective map of the human soul. Each insight she earns in silence becomes available to all who are ready to awaken. In her, evolution takes form. The world does not yet know how to honor such beings. It misunderstands them, labels them too sensitive, too emotional, too strange. But sensitivity is not a defect. It is the antenna through which creation hears itself. Empaths are the barometers of civilization. When they suffer, it is because the collective field is sick. When they heal, humanity shifts imperceptibly toward balance. That is why the empath's private journey carries cosmic importance. She is not just healing herself, she is recalibrating the frequency of the world's heart. In this final understanding, she ceases to fight her nature. She no longer tries to be normal, for normalcy is often merely collective denial. She accepts her calling as a vessel of feeling, knowing that her role is not to escape the storm, but to become its still center. She prays, not with words, but through awareness, a silent acknowledgement of the sacredness of existence, and in that stillness, she begins to hear life breathing through her. The trees, the wind, the laughter of children, all of it moves through her as a single rhythm. This is the empath's final metamorphosis, from absorber of pain to conductor of love. Her eyes change. You will notice it if you meet her. They no longer seek, they witness. They no longer mirror chaos, they reflect serenity. Within them, one can glimpse the ancient intelligence of the soul that has walked through darkness and remembered the light. She no longer explains herself because she knows that truth cannot be argued. It can only be lived. Her existence becomes her message. She does not try to convert others. She embodies her understanding, and that embodiment, quiet and radiant, becomes contagious. In dreams, she now meets the archetype of the divine feminine, not as a symbol but as presence. It appears as light woven into her own image, whispering, "You were never meant to fit into the world. You were meant to expand it." And she understands. Her life's solitude was not exile, it was gestation. The woman who walks alone has not been abandoned. She has been chosen to carry consciousness into places where silence still reigns. Every empath, every sensitive soul carries within them the same potential to be the bridge between the unseen and the seen. There comes a day, often unremarkable on the surface, when she steps outside and feels no separation between herself and the sky. The air touches her skin, and she feels it as her own breath. The earth beneath her feet is not ground, but body. In that instant, she knows what all mystics eventually learn, that love is not an emotion, but a state of being. It does not flow between two, it arises from one. She is that one. She always was. The woman who walks alone has at last come home, not to a house, not to a group, but to her own vastness. She can now walk among people without armor because she no longer fears connection. Her empathy is no longer a wound, but a wisdom. She does not seek to be understood, for she is understanding itself. And when she encounters another soul still struggling with their sensitivity, she does not rescue them. She simply says, through presence alone, you are not broken. You are simply becoming, this is the final teaching. The empath's journey is the blueprint for humanity's next evolution. As the world grows louder, faster, and more fragmented, it is the empath's way of seeing that will restore balance. The feminine principles she embodies: receptivity, intuition. Communion will be the medicine for an age poisoned by excess intellect and disconnection. She walks alone today so that tomorrow more may walk together in awareness. Her loneliness is the seedbed of collective awakening. And so, my friends, when you see her walking quietly, do not pity her. Do not call her weak or strange or solitary. Know that she is walking a path older than memory, a path that all must one day tread. For in the end, every soul must walk alone to discover that there was never such a thing as separation. The empath has simply discovered it first. In the depths of her solitude, she has found the universe listening. In the vastness of her silence, she has heard the heart of God whisper, you are not alone, you are everything. And with that realization, she no longer seeks friendship to escape loneliness. Her every step, her every breath, her every gaze upon the world is friendship itself, the eternal embrace between consciousness and creation. She smiles, perhaps faintly, as she disappears once more into the quiet streets, unnoticed by most, yet felt by all. For though the world may not know her name, it lives because she feels